methodology isn't normally the most exciting bit of the study, and it is a slightly dry talk, so bear with me, but it's very important that we do have a rigorously set out methodology, because we're trying to get the highest quality data out of this. So this is a prospective audit. That's probably the best way of getting good quality data, and it's 2 cycles, as Richard alluded to. The first cycle is to establish the current management of epistaxis across the UK. It's to provide some baseline data on recurrence and adverse events, and it's to inform the generation of this new clinical management pathway. There's no point coming up with a pathway if we haven't already looked at practice and seeing if this fits in with what's physically possible in UK hospitals. So having done cycle 1, we're going to introduce this management pathway, and then with cycle 2, the idea is to encourage implementation of the pathway, and then to assess it, to look at recurrence and complication data that results from it. Are we improving things? This is very much a national audit. There's 130 sites across England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's mostly trainees doing it, mostly ST3+, so it's a great opportunity to test run and sort of prove the concept of a national trainee collaborative for research and audit. And this is a map of all the different centres. Some of them are overlaid, as I said, it's 130, stretching from Truro up to Inverness. So the data collection period is 30 days. It starts this coming Monday in the early hours on the 7th of November, and then it finishes just before midnight on Tuesday the 6th of December. Hopefully goes without saying, it's 24-hour, 7 days a week data collection. So that means speaking to the night cover, if it's not ENT, and getting them on board as well. And then following on from this, we're going to be looking at 30-day adverse events. So preparation, most of you here are site leads. Hopefully you've got the approvals from your audit lead, from the audit department, from the Caldecott Guardian. If you haven't already, you need to test access to the data collection tool. There's a chance that your hospital, if it's got a strict firewall, may block it, but if you contact them, they'll let you access the tool, I'm sure. Publicise it, speak to your ENT department. It's important that everyone knows it's happening. Also speak to the ED team, because they need to be encouraged to adequately document things so that you know what's happened in the early stage of the treatment. And you also need them to be telling patients. It's really important that we put the posters up. That's to inform the team, but it's also to inform the patients that it's happening. This is an audit, and we don't need to take formal consent, but there is an obligation to just let patients know that this is happening. I put the task list in brackets. Most of you will have seen the task list. It was more useful earlier on to check people are up to speed. There have been a few technical difficulties, but it's hopefully been a useful tool. So who are we looking for? Well, we're looking for emergency, unscheduled presentations of epistaxis. Patients aged 16 or greater, and patients who are seen by the ENT team or someone acting as the ENT team out of hours, nurses, cross-cover, etc. We're looking for both admissions and patients who are seen and then discharged from hospital. We're excluding patients who aren't directly seen by ENT, so that's those that are seen by A&E and discharged without even speaking to us, maybe after cautery, and also those where there's only phone advice that's been given. If a GP phones you or A&E phones and you don't see the patient, then those patients are excluded. We're also excluding those that are seen in clinic. If they're seen in general clinic or emergency clinic, generally these patients aren't actively bleeding, they're treated and sent home. The exclusion to that comes if the patient has cautery or starts bleeding or is bleeding at the time they attend clinic, and then they need ongoing treatment or admission. They then become audit cases. So the role of the site lead is to collect patients as they present, prospective data collection. What we recommend is that you personally speak to the on-call SHO team and the night team, day and night teams every day, and that's to firstly ensure that they're recording data, that their notes are adequate for you to then enter data into the internet, and also to avoid missed cases. So if you're asking them a week later, it's quite possible you missed things. It also allows the opportunity to fill in gaps in data collection. If things aren't documented, the SHA might be able to tell you the answer. So the data that we're collecting maps directly onto this consensus document. We're very aware this is, there's a burden on you to be thorough and collect significant amounts of data. We tried to reduce the amount of data needed as much as possible. So everything that's not directly relevant to our future management plan has been cut out of this and removed. So hopefully everything that you do put down will be used and analysed. In summary, because Nish is going to go over this later, we're collecting the method of presentation, key history and medications, observations and blood results, details of the management and the outcomes of each management step, and 30-day adverse events. We've got a secure online data collection tool hosted by UCL. There's been a lot of requests to put a link on the front of the website for this. The problem with that is you then get lots of spam data entered. So we've emailed you the link to the RedCap tool. We've been having a discussion, and Matt Ellis will explain later. He's also going to introduce a sign-up system where you can sign up for a password and a username, and there will then be a link on the website using that. So you've got an option of either having a password or using the email link. If you do use the link, we suggest that you store it in a document or bookmark the page so it's easier to find than searching your emails each time. We ask that you aim to submit case records on the day of discharge. At the weekend, maybe that's not possible, but as soon as you can, so that if anything's been missed, it's easier to pick up. At the end of the data collection period, and you can combine this with the adverse events, which I'll talk to in a bit, we ask that you'd ask the audit department to do a search for the ICD-10 code for epistaxis, which is on there. And that's to pick up any cases that have been missed. Now you are going to pick up some cases that have been seen by ED, but those can be excluded, and it might be that you pick up some that have been missed through the SHA method. We're collecting anonymised data. It's really important that it is anonymised, and the tool won't let you put any patient identifiable data in there. And in order to do that, we have to have an ID key, so a key that will link an audit ID to the patient's details, and that can be stored locally securely. You can download this blank ID key from the website at the moment. It's designed to be simple, it's important to use it. I'll show you an example in a minute. It will provide the only way that we can go back in the future and link audit IDs to patient hospital numbers and names. And that's essential when it comes to the 30-day follow-up. So this is an example of the key. The patient IDs are going to be consecutive numbers for each site. I just need you then to connect the NHS number, name, and date of birth. This is then stored behind a locked door, essentially, which is the standard regulation that audit departments generally have on securing patient data. Once you've finished with it, it can then go to the audit department and they can take over securely storing it. So we want to know what adverse events are occurring as a result of either the treatment or the treatment not working. So we're looking at adverse events occurring over 30 days after the patient's presented. So it's a 30-day period that's only relevant to each patient. The definition of adverse events for the purpose of this audit is representation with bleeding or presentation with a complication of a treatment of epistaxis. And these adverse events should be captured if presenting to any specialty or any clinic. So if they have an MI because they've had too much cocaine, for example, if they're being treated, and they go to cardiology, that's still a complication that should be captured here. So, and that's rather than being the rules that we apply for the audit entry, where if they're not seen by ENT, they don't count, we want everything for adverse events. So in order to do this, after the 30-day audit period, we're going to email out a form that has all the audit IDs that you've submitted and a few boxes where you can enter data into. We ask that you obtain the medical records for these patients. Some hospitals have an IT system which is adequate, Others, you can just submit the list, your audit ID key to the audit department, and they'll pull all the notes for you. That's the beauty of already having it registered as an audit with the department. 30-day data can then be added onto this pro forma, maintaining patient anonymity, and returned via email to the steering committee. So there's a few examples here, sort of works examples, to take you through when we want data submitted. So if a patient presents a second time with bleeding during the audit period, they need to have a new online data entry started using the same audit ID as before. You won't overwrite the original data. And then that needs to be noted on the adverse event form. Okay, if it's in the November to December period where we're recording data, they have to have a new entry started. If the patient presents with rebleeding outside the audit period, but inside their own 30-day follow-up period after their 30 days after presentation, then that is entered onto the adverse event form. And similarly, if they present with a complication of treatment in the 30-day follow-up for that patient, it's added onto the adverse event form. When it comes to disseminating findings, we're hoping that you're going to submit your own findings or present your own findings locally at local audit meetings. The nationally collected data is going to be pretty extensive, and it will take a while to clean that and analyse that. So you won't get anything back straight away. The data will eventually be published, and it's important that you know this is going to be published under the Integrate name, and then everyone who's a site lead or a regional lead is going to be a co-author on that. So you'll be searchable on Medline and any other database, and found to be an author on that paper. If you want the national data from every site, you'll have to write to the Audit Steering Committee, and this is just to protect it really, to make sure it's being used appropriately. And so if you do want it, write to us, and we'll consider it as a panel and let you know if you can have it. Very briefly, the second cycle will happen after the publication of the National Management Guideline and after publication of the first cycle data. It'll be about summer 2017 probably before we're able to do the second cycle. It takes a while to get these things done. Again, it'll be 30 days and it'll be the same data set we're recording. So if you've got a problem as a site lead, it may be that you can get help from your local audit office. You've registered the audit, they're there now to support you and get patient notes. It may be that your regional champion can help. They may have had similar experiences in the region. But there's an audit steering committee representative for each region of the country. If you go onto the Integrate website, you can find that. And then you can email us directly or you can do it via the website. Please do that earlier rather than later. If you have a problem during data collection, we're ready to try and help. So I'm very happy to answer any questions. The website's on there, I'm sure you've been there already. Thank you very much for coming along. Yeah, Jess.
Can you printing off of the audit ID? So I was intending to keep it electronically.
Yeah.
Get in contact at home. Do it like that, is that acceptable? So I think all my entries on there will be.
The issue is you have to store it securely is the issue.
So it will be just kept on my Epic login.
Okay, if it's so Epic is the Cambridge electronic system, which Cambridge is paperless. So yes, Epic is an exception probably, in that you can store it securely. If you and your audit department are happy with you storing it electronically, and you've discussed passwords and things with them, then that's fine. But the idea of having a paper one was that you could keep it in a room, lock the door, other people can have access to it if they need to.
So, I mean, a secure computer in a locked office.
Yeah.
In a computer, sorry, in a hospital drive. So should potentially be discussed with the audit department or maybe.
Yeah.
I also arrived a little bit late, so I'm sorry for the nightmare.
Sorry.
But so I didn't see. Is this presentation is that available? Because there was quite a lot of information there.
Everything's going to be available on YouTube with links on the Integrate website. All right, thank you very much.
So, good morning everyone. My name is Oliver McLaren. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to my experience as a site lead for the National Epistaxis Audit, and hopefully give you some insight into some of the practicalities from running the audit as a site lead. First, a very quick bit about me. I'm currently a second year course surgical trainee down in Plymouth at Derriford Hospital. During the pilot study back in April, I was a CT1 at Torbay in Torquay, where I was a site lead. I've also been involved in some of the drafting of step-by-step collaborator guides on the Integrate website. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to run you through my experience, ranging from the hospital that I was working in at the time and how the pilot study fitted into my daily activities there, a review of some of our results from the study, some of the difficulties we experienced, and hopefully some of the tips and solutions that we worked out, and finally, if you've got any questions at the end, try and answer them for you. So, as you may have already heard or may already know, the pilot study was a 2-week snapshot audit with the aim of testing water to assess the feasibility of a national rollout of the audit, and also to assess management and help try and draw up some guidelines. Initially, there were many emails to and fro between local leads and national coordinators about some of the questions about who's been involved in the audit and which patients to collect. We've discussed some of that already, and it was going to be all patients presenting acutely to the ENT team, excluding SHO clinics and outpatient clinics. There were 6 centres across the UK. We all kept in quite close contact through emailing between us to pick up some of the problems that we were having throughout the audit process and help with any issues that we could have. You may find it a recurring theme. I'll talk about communication an awful lot. It was the best way that we could figure out the solutions and help each other out, really see how each of us was going. Torbay Hospital, the hospital I was working at the time, it's a 450-bed district general hospital in South Devon. One of the interesting points maybe about working in a hospital in Torquay is the variation in the numbers of people that we can see at any given time of the year. There's normally a resident population of about 375,000, which over the summer months swells up to 100,000 due to the large tourist population that comes in there. There's also about 78,000 emergency department visits annually to a relatively small ED of about 20 beds. The prospective nature of the audit, as we've talked about, it's beneficial in the sense that there's no trawling through vast piles of old notes. That makes it far more accurate. I'm not going to dwell largely on the specifics of data collection because it will be covered later on. But most of it can be found on the initial emergency department cardexes, including patient demographics, initial observations, and as a result, for me anyway, collecting the data was a relatively easy task. Regarding our results, over the 2-week audit, we saw 13 patients who were referred to the ENT team with epistaxis. Across the pilot sites, we had the highest mean age of patients, with the largest proportion of patients on anticoagulants. Regarding intervention, no one required any theatre or surgical intervention for their epistaxis. 3 patients required packing, 9 required cautery, and 1 was managed conservatively with no intervention. And our mean duration of stay was just less than 24 hours. Compared to the other sites, these numbers were actually fairly similar. This, of course, is going to be hugely variable and larger over a prolonged period of time. But it's useful to see that although this is a national project, at local sites, the numbers seen is really quite a manageable number and shouldn't be too much of a task for you.
Was the number of presentation also representative? There's about 1 a day in the other centre?
Yeah, roughly. There were some with less and some with, I think the highest number over the 2-week period was 18, and the lowest was about 4. Of course, there are difficulties that pop up in any audit, any project, and there are a few in the pilot study that I felt would be worth mentioning. Our audit lead at Torbay, affectionately known as Audit Mike, is notorious in his strict criteria of what actually fits an audit, and therefore quite strict in what gets signed off and what gets registered. His main difficulty was the fact that there were no set standards against which to measure our results. The way I smoothed this over was to say that this would help set up standards and guidelines against which to measure for future audit projects, and this seemed to help things with him. Certainly from speaking to some other site leads during the pilot, this was a similar problem with having no standards against which to measure our management. There were some concerns that we've already covered again about patient confidentiality regarding the fact that data was going to be submitted onto an external server. The way we got around this was using the patient codes rather than NHS numbers, and something that's going to be used for the national audit. There were some technical teething problems, as there often are with new projects, with the data collection tool, with a very small number of patients were, when we came to review at the end, didn't seem to be submitted, even though either it was my technical uselessness, but they didn't make it onto the final results. And that was where it was really good to keep backstop of information as if you were doing your own local audit. So I spoke to the audit department and kept my own list of patients securely on our ENT drive behind a locked door, which was a little bit of extra work, but really made there was a little bit of peace of mind and made sure that any patients dropped were submitted at the end. And more emails went back to make sure that everyone had been included. There were a few questions raised by our consultant body regarding the grade of doctor referring and the grade of doctor reviewing the patients and how it would affect our results. We noticed there was quite a wide range of things referred from ED, depending on the grade of referring doctor, and also what had been tried and what hadn't been tried before they were referred to us. Also with the SHO grade spanning F2 GP trainees, core surgical trainees and trust SHOs, as well as cross-cover docs who may not be ENT trainees. There was a difference between whether patients had appropriate quarterly or packing. But then that's the important thing with a national project, is to see what works best for the patients and what to avoid and what to try. It was also important to mention to the consultants that it wasn't a competition and that all the evidence was coming together to try and come up with something that would be concrete for the country rather than measure ourselves up against the other 6 departments. A few tips which hopefully won't come too late in the game. I, as an SHO, maybe slightly different for you guys who are ST3+, I rearranged my on-call week to fit in with one of the weeks of data collection. This gave me a little bit of extra control over the patients that came in, well, not the patients that came in, but the patients that I knew were the ones who had been referred to us during that week. We got the rest of the SHO team fully on board early. These are the people who are going to be seeing the patients, so their documentation is key. And most importantly, they need to let you know if an epistaxis patient is coming or been referred. For the pilot study, we again kept in close contact and used for the national audit, the regional leads would be a really good point of contact for any questions that you have. Again, securely keeping the NHS number helps for quick access for your 30-day mortality, depending on the computer systems you have at work to see patients coming in and representing. And also, I encourage you to present your findings locally, not only because it fills the criteria for an audit for your ARCP, but also keep your team motivated in terms of seeing their own feedback for how things are managed. Quick review of my actual experience on the floor. I found that open discussions with the audit department and with Audit Mike were really useful. Being very open and honest with him made things flow an awful lot smoother. They really had very little work to do as an audit department for the pilot study, and I think that helped. And we were very happy to work with any problems that they had. My consultants were very supportive in us taking part in the pilot, but very much left it in my hands to pursue it and carry it on at a local level. We had a cohort of 4 SHOs, so the workload was never really a great strain. And I think that even if you had a particularly busy period of epistaxis referrals, the management load is really it's not that big a deal. There's a problem that we had, which is certainly not isolated to Torbay Hospital, but the emergency department was under a huge amount of strain at the time. And that meant that a lot of patients were directly streamed to ENT, which may or may not be the case at your hospitals. Based on that, we had a huge variation of whether people had actually been appropriately triaged, formally assessed, or actually had any initial observations done. And I think certainly if I was to be site lead again, I would advertise it quite strongly in the emergency department, which I didn't do for the pilot.
Can I just ask, because what is it? Because I've been speaking to them, and then afterwards I was completely doubt whether this would actually meet. They're not going to respect this. They'll be dismissive. They say, "Oh, well, we should just direct the referral or whatever." It's the local agreement. They're not going to.
Yeah, no, I think. Well, yeah, I mean, I think inevitably patients will be streamed directly to ENT depending on how busy they are, and it's
So
just
this is a baseline audit practice.
Yeah,
The idea of this first cycle is not to manipulate what's happening, to allow things to happen. The only thing that would be useful from the ED department is wherever possible, they write down what they've done to that
Yeah,
patient.
okay, so
So
that's the
good
main
record.
message, because that wasn't, I was sort of all in concept with them, and suddenly I was sort of in doubt what was I was actually asking them to do. So to make sure that they record, if they had eyes, if they were present for how many minutes.
Do what they would do, but just record it.
But they might not record their exercise,
Yeah,
which
so-
is important stuff.
I think, I mean, certainly patients referred directly to us were instantly submitted to the, well, not instantly submitted, but were kept in our data collection tool. But some of the work can be done, some of the simple obs, the initial blood tests, the fluids, if they need fluids, can be started by A&E, which will, of course, will be put online as well. So yeah, I didn't advertise it at all really, which is my failing, but it would have made my job a little bit easier, I think, had I done so. Thanks for listening. I hope some of what I've said has been useful. It's a relatively simple project to undertake at a local level. I think it's all smaller local projects coming together which really puts our picture together. And it's not too difficult undertaking, I've found. So any questions?
So our point to make for all ENT trainees with a national training number is that involvement as a site lead is sufficient in itself to fulfil your annual audit requirement. You don't need to present it locally. You're very welcome to, of course, but actually just being involved in the project and submitting data ticks that box for you.
For the SHOs that help in data collection, can we get a certificate so they can put in
Yeah.
portfolios?
Yeah, I mean, yes. It was there'll be one site lead accredited on the paper,
Yeah.
and that will be the person who is on the. And I know a number of leaders in their departments have used other people as well. I think that's very reasonable. It'll have to be done on an individual basis. So if you perhaps email me with their names once you've gone through the process to say, look, this individual has done this, and this, and then I think that's a very reasonable thing to do.
I do have another question. Is it completely okay to train your SHO to enter the data? Because that was a little bit, it looked like the site lead was in charge, but
The
it also looked like you could ask somebody else to do it.
The site lead is responsible for uploading of data. I think other people can upload data, but they need to be absolutely clear of what they will be getting out of this process. And as site lead, you need to be absolutely clear that you're still responsible for the data that is uploaded, even if you delegate that task. Thanks, Ollie.
Hi, I'm Matthias. I don't need to go into too much detail about the website really, because it's just a website. It's a source of info. But a couple of questions that we've had, I'll probably take time to answer. One of which is how to get from the website to the link to the data collection tool. We deliberately haven't put that on the front public-facing point of the website, because once you go to the data collection tool, you don't require any password or anything to enter data. So we didn't want to, just allow anyone to put data in. We wanted to make sure it was just coming from who we know it's coming from. So there's an email. The email's been sent out with the links to the data collection tool, which you can just open up. But obviously, it's not that easy to remember. And if you're in A&E or away from your trust email, you might not have access to that. So we thought it would be useful to have a way of getting to the link, but in a way that's secure, so not via your email. So what I've just added recently is this way of logging into the website. So a couple of people were specifically asking how do you log into it, and it's only ever just been a sort of a static page for giving information, but this way you'll be able to get documents sent to you as well. So later on today, a link will go out allowing you to register for a username and password, just as a rule for any other websites. And then if you log in just here, then it'll bring up a list of either your hospital or your hospitals, depending on how many places you're working at, with various links like to the data collection tool, and then later on in the project, other files will be available there as well. So the 30-day follow-up